It's a dog napping in broad daylight.
It happened so fast, I was scared to death.
And these dog thieves are ruthless.
The owner struck multiple times while trying to stop it.
This is a desperate situation.
I was devastated.
And later, a shocking scene at a gas station.
I saw this rope, his neck wrapped with a duct tape.
That's part of a terrifying abduction.
He had guns.
This is really, really bad.
And a brave fight for survival.
I would rather get shot in the back running, trying to save my life, than just shot in the face.
May 23rd, 2021. Pueblo, Colorado, just before 10 a.m. Molly Leary is taking her dog Roxy for a walk.
I live by myself. She's my companion. Roxy, she's an awesome dog. She's a pit bull. She's still a puppy. She's the happiest dog there is. I take her out everywhere. She's my best friend.
But on this outing, something strange happens. A car passes Molly, then makes a U-turn to pull up beside her. At first, Molly thinks nothing of it, even when a woman gets out of the car.
She jumped out of the car. Oh, I love your dog. I would like to pet her. So I let her pet her. Usually when I walk her, everybody wants to say hi to her. It wasn't suspicious at all.
Her body language here seems very positive and very non-threatening. But within seconds, her real intent is revealed.
All of a sudden, she just grabbed my leash and started pulling on her and saying, "This is my dog now, bitch. This is my dog." She hit me. It happened so fast, I didn't really know what to do. We were fighting for the leash.
This woman is trying to steal Molly's dog, and it's a well-organized effort.
There was another girl that got out of the car. Somebody was behind the wheel. I couldn't see who it was.
Who are you?
This is a desperate situation. It's 2 against 1.
Why are you doing this? Please don't take my dog.
Molly is terrified.
No! David!
I didn't know if they had knives or guns. I had nobody around to help me. I was scared to death.
It's chaotic. During the struggle, Roxy breaks free.
Roxy got off her collar and she started to run home because she knows where home is. And when she heard me screaming, Roxy stopped.
Molly desperately looks around for help. One passing car does slow down.
And I was yelling, "Help me, help me, they're stealing my dog, help me." They just drove off. And that's when she started hitting on me. She grabbed my hair and started beating me up.
Molly is alone in a futile fight to save her own dog.
She's doing everything she can to keep her away from the dog.
But that's when the second dog napper swoops in.
The other dog napper scoops up Roxy and then begins sprinting for the getaway car.
Both women race off as Roxy yelps.
We hear Roxy. She's yipping. It's as if she knows that she has been dog-napped.
Molly is devastated, and it all happens so fast, she doesn't even get a good look at the car.
My eyes were teared because she was hitting me so hard. I only saw a couple of numbers of the license plate. I tried to get my camera out to take pictures of the car. I couldn't get it fast enough. And they took off. I was confused. I was crying. I was scared to death. It was heartbreaking.
And most crushing, Molly fears this won't end well.
Usually the cops say if somebody steals a dog like that, you'll never see her again.
As a car disappears with Molly's beloved dog inside, she's left alone in the parking lot.
I had nobody to help me. Then I went to the nearest place. All my friends are there. I screamed and hollered at everybody. They stole my dog. Everybody jumped out and tried to look for him. So I called the cops.
There seem to be no leads. But when police finally get surveillance video from a bank across the street, Molly shares it with the local news.
A dog napping and assault caught on camera in Pueblo. The owner struck multiple times while trying to stop it.
News stations also post Molly's heartbreaking story on social media.
Viewers were just shocked. They hadn't seen anything like this before. The second we posted, there was thousands of comments talking about the outrage that people had over this happening.
The video quickly goes viral.
Anything we could put it on, we put it out there.
And the response is overwhelming.
This whole town was looking for her. I had 1,500 remarks on my comments. There are some really caring people out there.
One of the people who notices the video happens to be a neighbor of Molly's. They don't know each other, but Bonnie is well known for her work in the area rescuing lost pets.
My heart just broke for Molly. It broke for Roxy. That dog was terrified. She had no idea what was going on.
And 3 weeks after Roxy is stolen, Bonnie notices an interesting post on a Facebook group for lost and found pets. A young woman in the group shares video of a dog she has spotted in her backyard.
The dog came up into her yard and she wanted to make sure that it was going to get home.
The dog is a pit bull and it looks a lot like Roxy. So Bonnie contacts the woman for more information.
And I was like, hey, that looks like the stolen dog. And she's like, well, do you know anyone who can come to microchip? And I said, you know what? I have a microchip reader.
A microchip could confirm exactly who the dog is and who it belongs to.
I met up with her. I did scan her, and she did not have a microchip.
In the meantime, Molly begins to lose hope.
I didn't know if they were going to use her for breeding, use her for fighting. They could have hurt her really bad. My heart was just totally ripped out. Here I was devastated.
But what Molly doesn't know yet is that Bonnie and the woman who found the stray dog in her yard are starting to think it must be Roxy.
We were comparing the dog to the photos that Molly posted, and you could fully see her chest. It is identical. And we're like, this is Roxy. This is her.
Bonnie decides to reach out to Molly on Facebook.
She said, I think I have your dog.
I said, hey, she was found about a couple miles away from the abduction area. Could you come and check? It could be Roxy.
At first, Molly is apprehensive.
The lady said to go look in the same parking lot where they stole her. To me, it's very fishy.
But she holds on to hope. Could it really be Roxy?
So I said, okay, I need to come see her. I cried the whole way. I was worried that it wasn't her.
The two women who have the dog are pretty sure it is Roxy, but they aren't certain either.
Roxy.
Still, as soon as Molly sets eyes on the dog, while Bonnie records on her phone, all doubts are removed.
This is Roxy with her mommy, and this is the kind lady that found her.
Yay. She knew it was me, and I knew it was her. I was so happy. I'm so thankful for those ladies. They gave me my life back.
It was just happiness. It was just a beautiful sight.
Here in this Pueblo parking lot is where Molly Leary's dog, Roxy, was violently snatched from her 3 weeks ago. Then yesterday, here, also her prayers were answered.
It's awesome that strangers would go out of their way to help an individual who is in distress.
If it really wasn't for social media, I probably would have never got Roxy back.
Police are still working to identify the dog nappers, and they don't know what happened to Roxy after the women took her or why they let her go. Molly wants justice.
They're gonna get him for assault, dog napping, and robbery. They need to go to jail, especially the girl that beat me up.
But more than anything, Molly is just grateful Roxy is back where she belongs.
Roxy's my life. She's my soul. I'd be so lost without her. Thank God she's home. My baby's home.
In Washington, another chilling kidnapping and an incredible battle to survive. May 2nd, 2021, Burien, Washington. It's a startling scene. A barefoot man runs across a gas station parking lot and frantically pleads with the clerk inside.
The first thought I had, he's somebody on drugs, very high, running very fast.
But then he takes a closer look.
I saw this rope, his neck wrapped with the duct tape. I was shocked. He said, close the door, they will shoot me. I thought this guy is really in some trouble.
It turns out his terrifying trouble began with a phone call an hour earlier, just after midnight.
I was in bed when I got the call from a friend and a client of mine. His dog was screaming in the background. He said, can you please come? So he's good to make it through the night.
Than, who is using an alias for this story, owns a small pet grooming business, and he never hesitates to help an animal in pain.
I thought it was an emergency situation. I said, I'll be there.
He just rolls out of bed, but it doesn't matter. He's in a rush to help this dog.
I went to go in and greet my friend. As soon as the door shut, someone came from behind me and punched me in the chest. It says, how you doing? I look at my friend and I say, what's going on? He's focused on scrubbing cheese out of a plate, not even bothered that this is happening. I see a woman walking at me with a knife and somebody else coming from behind the couch. He had a metal crowbar type device and rope.
Than is in shock.
This is not real. This is like a movie. He had guns, and I got the crap beat out of me. An iron bar. I got hit in the back probably 15 times, hit behind my knees. I fell down. One of the suspects started kicking me in the ribs.
These people are ruthless. Than's incredibly outnumbered in this house.
This is really, really bad. Everything is stacked against you.
I'm pleading to the homeowner for help. My mind's spinning, what is this? And one of them starts asking me bank information.
In the midst of all this violence, the motive becomes clear. These people are attempting to extort this man for his money.
I was set up.
Than realizes his so-called friend must have tipped off these violent strangers to a business loan he just got.
An SBA loan, about $45,000. I talked to my friend about this loan. He was somebody that I just trusted. They tied me up with rope, reinforced with duct tape. I accepted that I may die.
That's when Than's story becomes even crazier. Security cameras in the home show what happens next.
I got duct tape and rope around my neck and my mouth. My feet were bound together. I couldn't walk. I was having a hard time swallowing.
This is one of the most disturbing parts of this whole scene. You've got one guy leading, holding the rope. Than, he's got rope around his waist, his hands, feet. He's hopping his way out the front porch. Than could barely breathe because of the tape over his mouth. And the response he gets is terrifying. It doesn't really matter. You're going to be dead soon anyway.
I was told that we were going to go somewhere up north. I would provide them with information, and once it was verified, they were going to kill me. I'm just thinking in my head, how do I get out of this? They put me in the back of my own vehicle, on the driver's side in the back seat. They had a pickup truck following us.
As they drive off, Than prays someone will see him.
I was hoping, or there might be a cop driving by and I can kick out a window and he's gonna pull us over. And I was thinking, like, just please be there. And there's no police. Then the car starts talking. The alarm went off. We had 90 seconds to pull over before the vehicle shuts down.
Than's car is equipped with a warning alarm that it's about to automatically shut down because the gas is too low. It sends his captors into a panic.
They start freaking out. I have a gun put in my face. I'm thinking about my ex. I just wish I could give him a hug, tell my aunt I love her, tell my sister and brother, see you later. I believe with every ounce of who I am, I'm gonna get murdered.
Van's kidnapping has taken a turn for the worse. And with a gun at his head, he doesn't know what will happen next. Then the car turns off the road and stops.
I'm told if I say a single word, I'll put a bullet in my head. I won't have the luxury of waiting where we're going to be killed. The driver tells the passenger to go get gas. And I think, okay, maybe I've got one more shot.
Van's mind races as he comes up with a plan.
While this guy's pumping gas, I'm thinking this is my last opportunity. The next place we're going, I'm dead. I would rather get shot in the back running, try to save my life, than just shot in the face.
Van has one critical advantage. This is his car, and he knows it well.
When you lock and unlock this vehicle, if you keep pressure on the locking mechanism, it won't lock. I'm thinking, I'm tied up, I've got to get my foot free. To hold the locking mechanism with my toe, I tell the driver I'm having a cramp, that I have to lay down. I'm going to kick you in the back of your seat. I'm not doing anything, but I need to stretch my legs. The car is going to rock. What I was actually doing was rubbing my feet back and forth. I got my shoes off, and I was able to get one of my feet out of the binding.
When the driver unlocks the car to let the other kidnapper back in, Van makes his move.
I stick my toe in between the door handle right when he started to sit down into the seat. I used my foot to kick the door open, and I ran. And the last thing I heard, shoot him, he's running. And I screamed, help me, they're gonna kill me.
This has got to be a scene unlike anything anyone has seen ever at that gas station.
I'm running, the rope is still coming out of the car. And I made it in the store. The clerk just had this, what is this look on his face? I said, please help me. They're trying to murder me.
I saw a rope, a long rope. I immediately reacted. I go to lock the door.
He can tell this is a person in distress. And lucky for Van, he believes his story.
He had dialed 911 for me. He gave me his phone and said, you don't let go of this until the police are here. He stood in front of that locked door in between me and these people.
This attendant is confidently protecting himself, Van, and his store. Nobody's getting in here tonight.
Van's three captors linger outside. Then, suddenly, the black pickup truck drives right towards the convenience store.
I'm yelling at the 911 operator, where are you? There are armed people that kidnapped me.
Van realizes Aaron is also in danger.
I'm screaming at him, they're gonna shoot me. Please hide. He said, no, talk to the phone.
Instead of backing down, Aaron just leans in further. This guy is a total superhero in this really, really tough and terrifying moment.
Aaron has had enough.
I was so angry. I hit the door. He saw that I'm very angry. At the same time, I'm afraid.
He's trying to intimidate this person away. He's not going to let him get to Van.
The kidnappers hesitate, but then flee the scene before police arrive.
They sent fire trucks, ambulances, and lots of people. There was a huge SWAT team response to where the kidnapping happened.
At the scene of the attack, investigators recover surveillance video that shows the suspects came prepared.
One of the suspects has an enormous amount of red rope in his arms. Another one has tape around her wrist. This was a premeditated situation.
3 of the suspects are arrested within days, including the friend who lured Van to his home. A 4th, the one who beat Van, is later arrested in Nevada. The 5th suspect is elusive.
Hello, I'm David Rose, and here's a look at some of our top cases.
But after the video goes viral, U.S. Marshals find him hiding out in Florida.
I asked the detective, I need to know their plan for me. He goes, Van, I think they were going to kill you.
All 5 suspects are charged with felony kidnapping and robbery in the first degree. Fan is still stunned by the shocking betrayal.
To know that somebody that I thought was a really close friend put a monetary value on my life really messes up my head.
But he does now have a new friend.
Aaron, being the amazing person he was, he saved me, saved my life.
Aaron doesn't consider himself a hero. He just wants the people who tortured Fan to face justice.
I think they deserve to go to hell. The people like that, jail is nothing.
And Fan knows how lucky he is.
When you face your own mortality, it changes you. I survived. I survived this.
It's a vicious robbery.
I was bleeding. I think I'm gonna die.
But these thieves make a critical mistake.
This is the instructional video of what not to do if you're trying to rob a place.
And then
Armed robbery!
another store clerk fears for his life.
He had the knife open. Oh my God.
But this robber is in for a big surprise.
Lieutenant Ambassador, Armenian trying to arrest him.
A thief picked the wrong time to rob a convenience store.
Go fast, go fast!
September 2nd, 2020, just before dawn, Washington, D.C.'s Anacostia neighborhood. A gas station clerk opens for business after working the graveyard shift.
We're 24/7, 365. We run 24 hours. My employees work in a enclosed glass bulletproof booth, and the stores are locked overnight. My employee Mustafa was outside the booth. It's the beginning of the day when he has regular customers that come in for coffee. He's checking shelves, checking cleanliness. When he sees the customer come up, and he unlocks the door with his remote, and the customer comes in.
I opened around 6 o'clock. I was about to open the door anyhow, but I saw that the person outside, and he saw the door is locked. Then he was going back. I thought they are in need, so I just opened the door. He didn't look dangerous, and because of the pandemic, everyone has the mask on. He come inside, he just walk around to the cooler.
As the man slowly walks to get a drink, 2 of his friends come up to the door. Mustafa buzzes them in too, with no idea of how much danger he's just put himself in.
There was kids. They were about like 20 to 22, I guess. I was not nervous to let them in.
So the other 2 guys walk in, and what's strange is they don't even look around the store, they just walk to the front.
Mustafa has full control of all the doors.
The door is electronic, automatic lock. I have the remote all the time.
So Mustafa opens the door to go in the back.
But that's when something terrifying happens.
He gets rushed by the 3 customers, and the original customer pulls the gun out of his hoodie and points it right at Mustafa's face.
He was like, give me the money, show me the money, where's the money? And he said, I will shoot you.
As the store's security cameras record everything, Mustafa desperately tries to fight the robbers off, blocking them with his body.
When they rush Mustafa, they're screaming at him, "Where are the gloves?" Which is the most bizarre statement I've ever heard. They're asking for gloves so that they don't have fingerprints all over the place.
I was trying to do my best, to stop them, because I have 2 things in my mind, that this gun can be real or can be fake.
He's very tense, he's very nervous, he's very afraid at this point.
I am a good believer on God, so I was like, okay, if something is gonna happen, then I am not the one who can stop this thing. But I will try my best to, whatever I can do.
You can see fear in his eyes as he's backing up with a gun in his face.
But the gunman doesn't fire. Instead, he uses his gun to attack Mustafa.
He hit me on my head, and I was bleeding. I think maybe I'm gonna die.
That's when one of the robbers, who is armed with a crowbar, rushes over to the front door.
He tried to go outside and he found the door is locked. Then he started shouting, the door is locked.
He actually, when he sees the door locked, he puts the crowbar into the door and tries to jimmy the door.
Then the guy who had a gun with him, he go over there.
So while the two geniuses with the weapons are trying to open the front door, Mustafa is left with the one guy that has no weapon.
So when I thought that, okay, if they don't have any weapons with them, I can fight with him, right? So I was trying to keep him so that I can close the door. I'm trying to fight him so that he can get scared.
To Mustafa's relief, his strategy works.
Then he moved back. Then I locked myself in.
Mustafa gets in the booth and he locks the door and he's immediately calling 911.
911, what is your emergency?
I just grabbed the phone and I'm sure that they know that I was trying to call the police.
The three robbers are stuck inside. You can see the panic in their movements. And as they're running back and forth to the door and to the booth, there's no plan. It's a scary thing to watch. You just don't know what's going to happen. Nothing good can come out of this.
Only bulletproof glass stands between Mustafa and his attackers, who are desperately trying to get out.
They was trying to break the door. Then the one who had a rod with him, he put the rod in between the doors and he was trying to break it.
They've lost all of their power.
They're pulling on the door as hard as they can.
The frustrated robbers try to get back into the booth, where Mustafa has safely locked himself in.
They tried to come inside to get the remote to unlock the door. They was trying to break the door then. They was kind of scared too. They are just trying to escape the store. They was not confident. Maybe they don't have that kind of experience in this things.
Once Mustafa locks the door, there's nothing left for the robbers to do. They just need to get out and get away. With a gun, this is a serious crime. This is instant jail time. You had to get out. If not, they were going to go to jail.
They're begging and pleading to get out of here. Open this door. If you don't open this door right now. And in their anger, one of them even tries to open the door so hard that he rips the handle off.
They pull so hard that the handle pops off the door. That's a lot of strength to pull on the door and have it pop off a door. I mean, it's a bolt he had to break. The robber then falls backwards. It's kind of humorous looking at it. They're still pulling.
What the robbers fail to realize is that if they would just stop pulling, they might actually have some luck.
This is a push door. A magnet lock is holding the door. And magnet locks are not that strong. You put enough pressure on it, it will just pop open. But they pull the door. They're pulling on the door when it's a push.
With the robbers apparently stuck, their accomplice, who is sitting outside in the getaway car, tries to come to their rescue.
The other guys, he shouted on the other guy who was waiting outside. He said, bring the car, bring the car.
So our three robbers are banging, screaming, and pleading on the door to get out. And their partner on the other side in the car now realizes they're trapped and he's got to do something.
What happens next is shocking.
He jumps the curb and then the door gets pushed open.
As soon as this car plows through, it barely even opens the two doors. The three of them narrowly escape, trying to inch their way in between this little sliver.
Police arrive within 5 minutes. The robbers have already escaped, but don't realize they've left behind a very critical piece of evidence.
That license plate peeked right through the doors.
A few days later, a Prince George's County, Maryland detective called me who had heard about the attempted robbery. And it was very similar to several incidents they had in his jurisdiction. And he asked if he could come see the video. At that point, we saw the license plate, and they had everything they needed.
Police used the license plate to track down and arrest the robbers. At least 2 of them are juveniles. They suspect they're responsible for a string of similar burglaries.
They hit stores and hurt clerks in stores that did not have booths because there was no protection. The only reason I sleep at night is that my night guys are inside of a booth, a bulletproof glass booth.
The video of the robbery gone wrong prompts people to mock them on social media.
This is the instructional video of what not to do if you're trying to rob a place. This is everything you shouldn't do. And probably don't use your getaway car with an exposed license plate as a battering ram.
Mustafa doesn't understand why the robbers would go to so much trouble for so little money.
I had an experience before. If somebody come to rob, they just come inside, they grab candies, they grab sodas, and they just try to run. Never thought about that they are trying to come inside the booth for cash. It doesn't make sense. For $500-600, you're trying to kill somebody?
To be sure it never happens again, everyone at the gas station now lives by what they call the Mustafa rule.
The Mustafa rule is don't leave the booth when people are in your store at night by yourself. One little mistake, and that little mistake in just a few seconds could have ended very, very badly.
I think I'm never gonna do that again. You never know what's going on someone's mind. So I feel lucky to be alive.
In Massachusetts, another store clerk is also counting his blessings. Thursday, December 3rd, 2019, Newton, Massachusetts. It's the middle of the day and business as usual at this corner mini-mart.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Only the cashier, Charlie Patel, and one of his regular customers are inside the store when suddenly all hell breaks loose. A masked, armed robber storms into the store.
Hello, this is the 911 operator. What's going on?
Armed robbery.
Armed robbery, okay.
This robber decides to rob a convenience store, which is literally a 3-minute walk from a police station.
The robber is wearing a hoodie and wielding a knife, and he charges straight towards Charlie.
Hand the knife, open the register. Open the register. Oh my God.
Terrified, Charlie unlocks the cash drawer.
Charlie does a great job of giving the guy what he wants and then backing away into his safety. If he had yelled or screamed for help, this guy could have freaked out and stabbed him and maybe done something even worse.
But what the thief doesn't realize is that there's also a customer in the store. And this isn't just any customer, it's a police officer who sees everything.
He robbed guy, see police officer car, and he understand is next street police station.
At first, I thought it might have been someone joking around, and then Charlie was looking at me like, what is this guy doing? And then I saw him, he had a knife in his hand, and he was yelling at Charlie, give me the money. And then I'm like, this is for real.
But the lieutenant quickly sees a window of opportunity because the thief is so fixated on getting his cash.
He take the money, just like, see outside. You only for register, take the money.
He still did not know I was standing there.
This is a bold move. Cops are in and out of this market all day. This guy doesn't check for cameras, doesn't check for other customers, and just beelines it towards the register. This is a textbook disorganized crime.
So that's when Dave gets right in the robber's face.
That's when I drew my firearm, and I had the gun by my side, and he had the knife in his hand.
I saved my life, saved my life.
He was looking at me, and he was like, help me.
You see him draw his weapon and walk right up to the counter and just look at the guy. What are you doing, buddy?
And I was standing right across from the suspect, happened so fast, I think I just reacted. I just zeroed in on him and told him, drop the knife, drop the knife.
Then, the thief suddenly tries to make a run for it. But Dave manages to grab onto him.
And then we started wrestling around the store. Charlie jumped in. He was trying to help me subdue him. We were knocking over display cases and I was trying to handcuff him and place him under arrest.
During the altercation, he's unable to holster his gun.
My gun had fallen. I was trying to reholster, and I was trying to hold him back with one hand. I had the gun in the other hand, and when he started fighting, I couldn't get it back in the holster, and at some point, it fell behind the counter.
So the risk of the officer kind of tossing his weapon off to the side as he's struggling with the thief is that if this thief breaks loose, he could get hold of that weapon. And now we're going to have a whole host of other problems happening here.
Now, things are really scary. Dave is unarmed, and he doesn't know what this thief is capable of.
We know that the thief already has a knife, but we also don't know if he has other weapons on him.
I wasn't able to call on the radio or my phone. I was yelling to Charlie to call 911.
Charlie dials for help, but he's so scared he can't even talk.
I said, you talk to police station. I shaking.
I was struggling with the suspect. He held the phone up to my mouth, and I yelled into the phone who I was, where I was, and that we needed help.
Hello, this is the 911 operator. What's going on?
Police help! Armed robbery!
Armed robbery, okay. Is there a gun?
Yeah, what is it?
Yeah, we're on the way, sir. Tell me what he looks like.
Go fast.
We're on the way. Tell me what he looks like. Is he still there?
It's Lieutenant Tempesta. Armenia trying to arrest him.
On the way, Temp.
For Dave and Charlie, the next few minutes are absolutely terrifying.
What if backup never arrives and then something bad happens?
For Lieutenant Dave Tempesta, a 37-year veteran of the Newton Police Force, this is personal.
I've known Charlie probably about 15 years, and we've become friends. That day, like every other day on the way to work, I always stop and get a coffee, and then I stop by the store, and I usually bring Charlie the coffee also. Small, extra cream, extra sugar.
When the robbery first unfolds, Dave isn't even paying attention.
I bought a lottery ticket, and then I stepped back to the back of the store.
But the moment he realizes his friend is in trouble, he jumps into action.
I don't know if my guard was down, but it sure went up quick when that guy came in the store to rob it. It was adrenaline.
And now, as he waits for backup to arrive,
we're on way.
He's in a dangerous struggle. Scared and not sure how to help, Charlie desperately tries to get assistance from outside the store.
I open the door. I told the customer, come here, give me help.
Two customers entered the store and tried to barricade the door. It is a full-on fight.
At one point, he had made it to the exit door. Both Charlie and I were yelling to them to help us, and they were helping hold on to him.
Oh my God. We fell down 2 times.
In the midst of the frenzy, the thief's hoodie comes off and his face is finally revealed.
It was like a stocking hat, and he had a hood over that, and during the struggle, that had come off.
And finally, after 5 long minutes, Lieutenant Tempesta and the 3 other men are able to subdue him.
They were helping hold on to him, and at the same time, backup units arrived.
Responding officers promptly arrest the thief, who seems confused about who thwarted his plan.
He's asking the cops who arrived whether or not the officer in the store was a real cop or not.
For law enforcement, this was right place, right time. But for this guy, it was the wrong place and the worst time.
The would-be thief is identified as 30-year-old Thomas Zikos.
He was not known to us. He did not live in the area here.
Investigators say Zikos told them he's struggling with addiction.
Zikos pleads not guilty to charges of armed robbery, assault, battery on a police officer, and resisting arrest. He's still awaiting trial. Lieutenant Tempesta is just glad he was in the store when Zikos tried to rob it.
Charlie started hugging me, and he was so appreciative. With the both of us, I don't think we could believe what happened.
He saved my life. Oh, thank God. My granddaughter and my family is grandpa. Oh, God, you're Rob, you saved your life, grandpa. He every day scared.
I look at it sometimes, and I don't believe that's me there. I'm like, why did this happen?
The video of Lieutenant Tempesta saving the day makes big news, and he is hailed as a hero.
Police officer just looking to play the lottery becomes a hero, turning the tables on an armed robber in Newton. Lieutenant Dave Tempesta saw the holdup happening from the back of the convenience store, and he jumped in to stop it.
I got calls from friends in Florida, and they said they seen me on TV, and I'm like, what are you talking about? I had no idea. The mayor had a ceremony and presented both Charlie and I with a plaque of appreciation. It was really nice. I received a commemorative coin from the chief of police, which they give to officers that do something that stands out. It made me feel good. I mean, nothing like this ever happened before in my career, and felt like they appreciate me.
And now, this officer and store clerk are bonded for life.
My life changer. Dave is good, my friend, good officer. He's come here and saved my life. I thank God. I pray Dave is long life. Me too.
Just made us even closer. Charlie needed help, and I was right there for him, and everything worked out good. It was just unbelievable what happened.
The summer of 1971 arrived quietly in Milan. By late July, the city had begun to empty as families packed their luggage, locked the shutters of their apartments, and escaped toward the coast or the mountains in search of relief from the relentless heat. The pace of life slowed. Streets that had only weeks earlier been crowded with students, commuters, and workers became noticeably calmer. Universities, usually alive with conversation and ambition, stood almost deserted. Corridors that had echoed with lectures and footsteps throughout the academic year were now occupied by maintenance crews preparing the buildings for another semester. It was a season of transition, a brief pause between endings and beginnings. And within that pause, on a day that should have passed unnoticed, one of Italy's most enduring criminal mysteries quietly unfolded. Atti de prestigios Università Cattolica del Sacro Cuore. There was little reason for anyone to expect tragedy. The campus remained open, but only a handful of people moved through its halls. A few members of staff continued their administrative work. Security personnel watched over the grounds. Several students stopped by briefly. For construction workers were repairing sections of the building using pneumatic drills powerful, enough to shake the floors beneath their feet. Their machines produced an almost continuous roar, a metallic rhythm that reverberated through stairwells and corridors, drowning out ordinary conversation. Later, investigators would come to believe that those deafening drills had done something far more devastating than interrupt the silence of a summer morning. They may have hidden the final cries of a young woman fighting desperately for her life. No one looked toward the noise because the noise itself seemed ordinary. Nothing about the sounds coming from the construction site suggested that, only a short distance away, violence was unfolding behind a closed restroom door. The university remained calm. Employees continued their routines. Workers continued drilling. Visitors came and went. Life moved forward, unaware that history had already been written inside one isolated corner of the building. 2 days passed before anyone realized something was terribly wrong. On the morning of July 26th, a young seminarian named Mario Tozo was walking through the university near Staircase G when he noticed something unusual. He could hear water running continuously. In a building that was largely empty during the summer break, the sound stood out. Curious, he approached the women's restroom. What he encountered next would remain with him for the rest of his life. The door handle bore traces of blood. Inside, The water continued to flow from an open faucet. Lying on the restroom floor, surrounded by blood, was the body of a young woman. She was 26-year-old Simonetta Ferrero. The scene was one of shocking brutality. Mario Tozo immediately fled to alert the university authorities. Within a short time, police officers, investigators, and forensic specialists filled the corridors that only moments earlier had seemed abandoned. The quiet university instantly transformed into the center of one of the most perplexing homicide investigations in modern Italian history. As investigators examined the crime scene, the contradictions became impossible to ignore. Simonetta had not been robbed. Her money remained with her. Her watch was still on her wrist. Her jewelry had not been taken. There was no evidence that she had been sexually assaulted. Yet the violence inflicted upon her was extraordinary. The autopsy would later determine that she had been stabbed 33 times, with 7 of those wounds proving fatal. Defensive injuries on her hands revealed that she had fought desperately, even attempting to grasp the knife blade itself in a final effort to survive. Blood covered the walls, the floor, and the restroom door, telling the silent story of a fierce struggle. And yet, despite the ferocity of the attack, the killer had vanished. Almost nothing had been left behind. There were no eyewitnesses willing to identify a suspect because there were no eyewitnesses at all. No one reported hearing screams. No one reported seeing a panicked man fleeing the building. No one noticed anything sufficiently unusual to trigger alarm. The only physical clues were painfully limited: a bloody handprint on the restroom door, a few skin cells preserved beneath Simonetta's fingernails, and the physical layout of the crime scene itself. In 1971, however, forensic science had not yet reached the level that modern investigators would later take for granted. DNA profiling did not exist as an investigative tool. The biological evidence recovered from beneath the victim's fingernails could not reveal the identity of the person who had attacked her. What today might have been considered a decisive breakthrough instead became another unanswered question preserved in police files. Detectives worked tirelessly to reconstruct the events of July 24th. They interviewed hundreds of people connected to the university. Construction workers were questioned. Security guards were questioned. Staff members, professors, students, and visitors all found themselves answering investigators' questions. Every possible witness was examined in the hope that one forgotten observation might unlock the mystery. Yet every promising lead gradually dissolved. The investigation expanded, but certainty remained just beyond reach. The crime itself became increasingly difficult to explain. Without robbery, without confirmed sexual assault, and without any known personal conflict involving Simonetta Ferrero, investigators struggled to establish a motive. Was she deliberately targeted? Had she encountered a stranger by chance? Was the killer someone familiar with the university? Or had an entirely random encounter inside a nearly empty building escalated into unimaginable violence? Each possibility carried its own difficulties. None could be proven. The more detectives searched for answers, the more the case seemed defined by what could not be explained rather than by what could. In time, newspapers across Italy began referring to the murder by a name that would become permanently associated with it: Delitto della Cattolica, the murder of the Catholic University. The title reflected not only the location of the crime, but also the profound sense of disbelief surrounding it. Universities represented places of education, routine, and intellectual pursuit. They were not expected to become settings for unsolved acts of extreme violence. The contrast between the institution's reputation and the savagery of the murder only deepened. Public fascination, as months turned into years and years into decades. Simonetta Ferrero's case refused to disappear from Italy's collective memory. It was revisited in newspaper investigations, television documentaries, books devoted to unsolved crimes, and discussions among criminologists searching for overlooked clues. Advances in forensic science transformed countless other cold cases around the world. But Simonetta's murder remained resistant to every new wave of investigative optimism. The evidence had simply never been sufficient to identify the person responsible. More than half a century has now passed since that July morning. The university continues to educate new generations of students. The construction noise that may once have concealed a desperate struggle faded long ago. The people who walked those corridors in 1971 have grown old, and many are no longer alive. Yet one question has survived every passing decade. It is a question rooted not only in the brutality of the crime, but in the haunting absence of answers. How could someone enter one of Italy's most respected universities, murder a young woman in broad daylight, leave behind almost no trace, and disappear forever without ever being identified? This is the story of Simonetta Ferrero, a promising young professional whose life ended inside a university restroom on a quiet summer afternoon, and whose killer remains unknown to this day. Simonetta Ferrero was 26 years old when her life came to an abrupt and violent end. But reducing her story to the circumstances of her death would overlook the person she had been during the years that came before it. Like so many victims whose names become permanently associated with unsolved crimes, Simonetta entered history because of a single terrible day. Yet before that day arrived, she was known not as the subject of a police investigation, but as a daughter, a university graduate, and a young professional beginning what appeared to be a promising future. Understanding who she was is essential because the mystery surrounding her murder begins with a simple but unsettling truth. There is nothing in her known life that suggested she was in danger. Born on April 2nd, 1945, Simonetta belonged to a generation that grew up alongside Italy's post-war reconstruction. The country was changing rapidly during her childhood and adolescence. Economic development, expanding industries, and greater access to higher education created opportunities that had not existed for many Italians only a few years earlier. Simonetta took advantage of those opportunities through education. She enrolled at the Università Cattolica del Sacro Cuore, one of Italy's most respected universities, where she studied political science. In 1969, she successfully completed her degree. Graduating from such an institution represented both personal achievement and the beginning of a professional life built on education and discipline. After university, Simonetta secured employment as a recruitment specialist at Montedison, one of Italy's major industrial companies at the time. Her work placed her in a position of responsibility, requiring organization, communication, and careful judgment in selecting and evaluating personnel. Friends, colleagues, and those who knew her described her as intelligent, serious, and dependable. She came from a comfortable family background and appeared to enjoy a stable life. Investigators would later examine every aspect of her personal history, searching for conflicts, financial problems, troubled relationships, or hidden disputes that might explain why someone would wish to harm her. They found none. There was no evidence that she had criminal associations. There was no documented history of threats or harassment directed specifically at her. Nor did investigators uncover any turbulent romantic relationship capable of providing an obvious motive for murder. In many homicide investigations, detectives begin by examining the victim's closest relationships, believing that answers often lie within familiar circles. In Simonetta's case, that familiar circle offered remarkably few signs of trouble. Instead of uncovering a complicated personal life filled with potential suspects, investigators found an ordinary young woman whose future appeared stable and whose daily routines reflected little more than the normal responsibilities of adulthood. This absence of apparent motive would become one of the investigation's greatest frustrations. On Saturday, July 24th, 1971, Simonetta prepared for what should have been an ordinary summer day. She was making arrangements before leaving on a family vacation to Corsica, a destination that promised a temporary escape from Milan's summer heat. Like many people preparing to travel, she intended to complete several personal errands before departure. The documented timeline of her day reveals nothing unusual at first glance. She went shopping for books, an entirely routine activity. She visited a cosmetics store. She also had a beauty appointment. Each stop reflected the kind of practical preparations many people make before beginning a holiday. Looking backward through the lens of tragedy, investigators carefully reconstructed these movements, hoping that one destination or one encounter might explain everything that followed. Yet none of these early activities raised concern. There was no documented argument, no suspicious confrontation, and no indication that she believed she was being followed. The available evidence presents a morning that unfolded with remarkable normality. It was only later, after completing these errands, that Simonetta made a decision which would forever become the central unanswered question of the case. At some point before midday, she went to the Università Cattolica del Sacro Cuore, the university from which she had graduated 2 years earlier. That decision has remained one of the most discussed aspects of the investigation because no one has ever been able to establish with certainty why she returned there. Unlike many mysteries in which investigators possess multiple conflicting witness accounts, the uncertainty surrounding Simonetta's visit stems from the absence of reliable evidence rather than the presence of contradictory testimony. Over the years, several explanations have been proposed. One suggestion held that she intended to photocopy academic materials for a friend. Another proposed that she planned to borrow books. A third suggested she wanted to collect information about courses or university documents. Still another possibility was considerably simpler. She may have entered the university merely to use the restroom while moving through the city. Each of these explanations is plausible on its own. None, however, has ever been supported by sufficient evidence to be accepted as fact. The reason for Simonetta's presence inside the university, therefore, remains unknown. That uncertainty is more significant than it may first appear. If investigators cannot determine why a victim entered the location where a crime occurred, they also struggle to determine whether the victim was expected there, whether someone anticipated her arrival, or whether the encounter with the killer happened entirely by chance. Every theory concerning the murder ultimately begins with the same unanswered question. Why did Simonetta walk into the university that day? The setting itself only deepens the mystery. It was the end of July, well after the conclusion of the academic year. The normally vibrant campus had become unusually quiet. Lecture halls stood empty. Student activity had diminished dramatically. Only a small number of people remained inside the buildings. Some university staff continued administrative duties despite the summer break. Security personnel monitored the premises. A few students still visited the campus from time to time. Most notably, for construction workers were carrying out renovation work using pneumatic drills to repair sections of the flooring. Their equipment generated an almost constant mechanical roar that echoed through the building. Investigators would later regard this detail as critically important. The noise was not simply part of the background. It may have fundamentally shaped the crime itself. Under ordinary circumstances, a violent struggle involving dozens of stab wounds might have attracted immediate attention. Someone might have heard screams, cries for help, or the sounds of desperate fight. On that July day, however, the relentless drilling may have overwhelmed every other sound. Detectives would later conclude that the construction noise could have masked Simonetta's final attempts to call for assistance, allowing the attack to unfold without drawing anyone to the scene. The physical environment, therefore, created conditions unlike those of a typical university day. The building was sparsely occupied, reducing the likelihood that anyone would unexpectedly enter the area. The noise from the renovation work diminished the chances that anyone nearby would recognize signs of danger. Together, these circumstances formed a tragic combination that investigators could never ignore. Yet even these observations did not explain whether the killer had planned the attack or merely exploited an unexpected opportunity. If the murderer was familiar with the university, he may have known that the campus would be unusually empty and that construction work would provide an effective cover for violence. On the other hand, if the attack was entirely random, the environmental conditions may simply have favored the killer by coincidence. The available evidence cannot distinguish between these possibilities. As Simonetta moved through the university that afternoon, there is nothing to indicate that her life was about to change forever. No witness later reported seeing her visibly distressed. No one recalled a confrontation that immediately preceded the attack. There was no documented indication that she anticipated danger or attempted to avoid anyone inside the building. She entered an institution she already knew well, one she had attended as a student only 2 years earlier. It was a familiar place, not an unfamiliar or threatening environment. That familiarity makes the events that followed all the more unsettling. Universities are generally associated with education, routine, and intellectual pursuit rather than sudden acts of violence. For Simonetta, the campus had once represented years of study and personal accomplishment. On July 24, 1971, it became the setting of one of Italy's most enduring unsolved murders. Investigators would spend decades trying to understand how an ordinary day, filled with ordinary errands and preparations for an upcoming family vacation, could end inside a nearly deserted university building in circumstances so brutal and so inexplicable. The answers they sought would prove far more elusive than anyone could have imagined. Sometime between approximately 11:00 a.m. and 1:00 p.m. on Saturday, July 24, 1971, the ordinary rhythm of a quiet summer day at the Università Cattolica del Sacro Cuore was interrupted by an act of extraordinary violence. The precise sequence of events inside the building has never been fully reconstructed, not because investigators failed to examine the scene carefully, but because no eyewitness ever came forward to describe what happened inside the women's restroom near Staircase G. Everything that is known about those final moments comes from physical evidence, forensic examination, and the silent testimony left behind by the crime scene itself. There were no surviving witnesses to tell investigators when Simonetta Ferrero entered the restroom. No one could say whether she had been followed through the university corridors or whether she encountered her attacker only after stepping inside. No one could describe the first words exchanged, if any were spoken at all. These unknowns have remained at the heart of the mystery for more than half a century. What investigators were able to determine was that Simonetta entered the women's restroom sometime within the estimated time of death established during the post-mortem examination. From that point onward, the evidence suggests that she became the victim of an exceptionally violent knife attack. The physical condition of the scene demonstrated that what occurred was not an instantaneous assault, from which she had no opportunity to react. Instead, every indication pointed toward a desperate struggle. Blood was found throughout the restroom. It stained the floor, marked the walls, and appeared on the doors inside the room. The distribution of the blood suggested movement during the attack rather than a single fatal blow, delivered in one location. Investigators concluded that Simonetta fought fiercely to defend herself. Among the most significant findings were the injuries to her hands. These defensive wounds are often regarded in forensic investigations as evidence that a victim consciously attempted to protect themselves from an assault. In Simonetta's case, the injuries were particularly revealing. They indicated that she had attempted to seize or block the knife with her bare hands. Such wounds speak to an instinctive struggle for survival, reflecting the desperate efforts of someone trying to stop an attack that was unfolding at extremely close range. The knife was not simply used once or twice. According to the official investigation, Simonetta sustained 33 stab wounds, 7 of which proved fatal, although some later publications have cited a higher number. The figure of 33 is the one generally accepted by investigators and supported by the official findings. The wounds affected multiple areas of her body, including her chest, abdomen, neck, back, and arms. Their distribution reinforced the conclusion that this was an attack of remarkable ferocity. Yet despite the overwhelming violence, the crime scene presented investigators with an immediate contradiction. There was no indication that robbery had motivated the assault. Simonetta's money remained untouched. Her watch had not been removed. Her jewelry was still in place. The attacker had made no attempt to steal the valuables she carried. This absence of theft quickly led investigators away from one of the most common motives in homicide: investigations. Equally significant was another conclusion reached during the autopsy. Examiners found no evidence that Simonetta had been sexually assaulted. In many violent attacks involving isolated victims, investigators naturally examine whether sexual violence played a role in the crime. In this case, the available medical evidence did not support that conclusion. As a result, detectives found themselves confronting a deeply unsettling question. If the murder was not committed for financial gain, and if there was no confirmed sexual assault, then what had motivated such overwhelming violence? That question has never received a definitive answer. The restroom itself became the only witness capable of offering clues. Every bloodstain, every mark, and every object within the room was carefully documented by investigators attempting to reconstruct events that no human observer had seen. Among the details that drew attention was the fact that water continued to flow from one of the faucets. When Simonetta's body was eventually discovered, the tap remained open, allowing water to run continuously for nearly 2 days. Whether the faucet had been turned on before the attack, during the struggle, or afterward could not be determined with certainty. Nevertheless, its continuous operation had consequences for the investigation. Flowing water, combined with the passage of nearly 48 hours before the crime was discovered, inevitably affected the preservation of the scene. Investigators recognized that valuable traces may have been altered or lost before forensic specialists had the opportunity to examine them. The delay between the murder and the discovery of the body became one of the investigation's greatest obstacles. Unlike crimes that are reported immediately, Simonetta's death remained hidden inside a nearly deserted university building throughout the remainder of July 24th and all of the following day. The circumstances that allowed this to happen were extraordinary but tragically understandable. It was the height of summer vacation. Very few people had reason to enter that section of the university. Administrative activity was limited. Student traffic had almost disappeared. Most importantly, construction work continued elsewhere in the building. For workers operated pneumatic drills whose deafening noise echoed continuously through the corridors. Later, investigators concluded that this relentless construction noise may have concealed every sound produced during the attack. If Simonetta screamed for help, those cries may never have reached anyone capable of recognizing them. Even if someone had heard an unusual noise, the overwhelming mechanical sound of the renovation work could easily have masked its significance. This possibility transformed what had seemed like an ordinary detail of campus maintenance into one of the case's most haunting elements. The drills that repair the university floors may also have shielded a murderer from immediate discovery. As July 24th passed into evening, no alarm was raised. Simonetta's absence did not immediately trigger an emergency because there was no obvious reason for anyone to suspect that she had entered the university or encountered danger there. Throughout the following day, July 25th, the building remained quiet. Behind a closed restroom door near staircase G, Simonetta's body remained undiscovered. Time slowly became another enemy of the investigation. Every passing hour increased the possibility that fragile evidence would deteriorate. Environmental conditions altered the crime scene in subtle ways that investigators could never fully reverse. When forensic science later advanced in the decades that followed, many observers reflected upon how differently the case might have unfolded had the body been discovered immediately after the attack. Yet history offered no such opportunity. The discovery finally came on the morning of July 26th. Mario Tozo, a young seminarian, happened to be near staircase G when he noticed the sound of running water. Under ordinary circumstances, such a detail might have seemed insignificant. But in a largely empty university building, the uninterrupted flow of water drew his attention. Curious, he approached the women's restroom to determine the source of the sound. As he reached the entrance, he noticed something deeply disturbing. The door handle bore traces of blood. Faced with this alarming sight, he opened the door. Inside, the faucet continued to run. On the restroom floor lay the body of Simonetta Ferrero, surrounded by blood. The brutality of the scene was immediately apparent. There was no uncertainty that a terrible crime had occurred. Shocked by what he had found, Mario Tozo did not remain inside. He hurried away to notify the university authorities, setting in motion the investigation that would consume detectives for years to come. Soon afterward, police officers, forensic personnel, and investigators arrived at the university. The area surrounding staircase G was secured, and the restroom became the focal point of one of Italy's most challenging homicide investigations. As specialists documented the evidence, they quickly realized that the crime presented an extraordinary combination of violence and silence. The attack itself had been savage, yet it had occurred without producing any witness capable of identifying the assailant. The victim had resisted with remarkable determination, yet her efforts left behind only limited forensic traces. The killer had vanished from a respected university campus in broad daylight without attracting confirmed attention from anyone present. Every observation made at the scene deepened rather than solved the mystery. Investigators could see the consequences of the struggle with unmistakable clarity. They could document where blood had fallen, where Simonetta had fought, and how intensely she had attempted to survive. What they could not determine was the identity of the person standing opposite her during those final moments. The absence of that single answer would define every stage of the investigation that followed. The physical evidence established beyond doubt that Simonetta Ferrero had struggled with extraordinary courage against a relentless attacker. It revealed the severity of the violence and the determination with which she resisted. But it remained silent on the one question investigators needed most desperately to answer. Who had entered that restroom with her, or followed her there, and why? Those unanswered questions would soon shape an investigation involving hundreds of interviews, painstaking forensic analysis, and decades of speculation. Yet despite every effort, the truth behind what happened inside the women's restroom near staircase G on that July afternoon would remain just beyond reach. The discovery of Simonetta Ferrero's body marked only the beginning of what would become one of the most frustrating homicide investigations in modern Italian criminal history. Detectives arriving at the Università Cattolica del Sacro Cuore were confronted with a crime scene that revealed extraordinary violence but offered remarkably little direction toward the person responsible. Every homicide investigation begins with two fundamental questions: who was the victim, and who had reason to kill them? In Simonetta's case, investigators could answer the first question almost immediately. The second would remain unresolved for more than half a century. The initial forensic examination confirmed the brutality already visible at the scene. Simonetta had sustained 33 stab wounds, although some later publications would cite the figure of 44. The official investigation, however, generally accepted 33 wounds as the accurate number. 7 of those injuries were determined to be fatal. The wounds were distributed across multiple areas of her body, including her chest, abdomen, neck, back, and arms, demonstrating that the attack had been prolonged rather than instantaneous. Equally significant were the injuries to her hands. These defensive wounds showed unmistakably that Simonetta had not been taken completely by surprise, without any opportunity to react. Instead, she fought with remarkable determination. The cuts to her palms and fingers indicated that she had attempted to seize the knife itself or shield herself from its blade. Such injuries are among the clearest forensic indicators of active resistance. They revealed that Simonetta struggled until the very end, attempting to survive despite the overwhelming violence directed against her. Yet the autopsy also produced conclusions that immediately complicated the investigation. Medical examiners found no evidence that Simonetta had been sexually assaulted. Likewise, investigators determined that robbery had not been the motive. Her money remained untouched. Her watch had not been removed. Her jewelry was still with her. Nothing of apparent value had been taken from the scene. These findings forced detectives to eliminate 2 of the most common explanations for violent attacks against isolated victims. If the crime had not been committed for financial gain, and there was no confirmed evidence of sexual violence, investigators were left searching for another motive. That search would ultimately prove unsuccessful. The crime scene itself offered only a handful of physical clues. Among the most important was a bloody handprint left on the restroom door. Forensic specialists examined the impression carefully, hoping it might provide identifying characteristics about the killer. Although fingerprint technology of the period could sometimes identify known offenders, the available evidence did not lead investigators to a specific individual. Instead, experts were only able to make limited observations regarding the size and placement of the handprint. Combined with other physical evidence, they suggested that the attacker was likely a man approximately 1.80 to 1.85 meters tall, noticeably taller than the average Italian male of the early 1970s. This estimate became one of the few pieces of information investigators could circulate publicly, yet it remained only an approximation rather than a reliable identification. Another potentially valuable discovery came from beneath Simonetta's fingernails. During the struggle, she had apparently managed to scratch her attacker, leaving behind small amounts of skin cells. Today, such biological evidence might represent one of the strongest investigative tools available. Modern DNA analysis has solved countless cold cases by identifying suspects decades after crimes. We're committed. In 1971, however, those scientific techniques did not yet exist. The material recovered beneath Simonetta's fingernails could be preserved, but it could not reveal the identity of the person from whom it originated. Investigators recognized that the evidence might one day become important if technology advanced, but at the time it could offer no immediate answers. The limitations of forensic science, therefore, became one of the defining obstacles of the case. Detectives also examined the movement that had occurred inside the restroom during the attack. Bloodstain patterns demonstrated that Simonetta had not remained motionless. She had moved throughout the confined space while resisting the assault, and the attacker had likewise changed position repeatedly during the struggle. Even so, the physical evidence could not reconstruct every movement with certainty. It revealed the existence of a violent confrontation, but could not explain how it began, whether words had been exchanged beforehand, or how the attacker ultimately escaped without being observed. as investigators completed their forensic examination. Attention shifted toward reconstructing everyone who might have been present inside or near the university on July 24th. The scale of the investigation expanded rapidly. More than 300 individuals were interviewed over the course of the inquiry. Detectives questioned the 4 construction workers whose pneumatic drills had echoed through the building throughout the day. They interviewed university security personnel responsible for monitoring the campus. Administrative staff, professors, students, maintenance workers, and anyone known to have been present in the vicinity were asked to account for their movements. Every interview sought to answer the same fundamental questions. Had anyone seen Simonetta enter the university? Had anyone observed a suspicious individual? Had anyone noticed unusual behavior before or after the estimated time of the murder? Despite the sheer number of interviews conducted, investigators encountered the same obstacle repeatedly. Because the university was nearly empty during the summer vacation, relatively few people had been present. Those who were there generally reported nothing extraordinary. The constant construction noise further complicated witness recollections. If anyone had heard sounds that might otherwise have attracted attention, they could easily have been dismissed as part of the ongoing renovation work. The absence of eyewitnesses gradually became one of the investigation's defining characteristics. Unlike many homicide cases in which contradictory testimony must be evaluated, detectives in Simonetta's case often faced the opposite problem. There was simply no direct testimony describing the attack itself or the identity of the attacker. Even Mario Tozzo, the young seminarian who discovered Simonetta's body on July 26th, briefly came under investigative scrutiny. Such attention was neither unusual nor an indication of guilt. Standard homicide procedure requires investigators to examine carefully the actions of anyone who discovers a victim, ensuring that no possibility is overlooked. Detectives questioned Mario regarding his movements, his reasons for entering the area, and his actions after finding the body. They also looked for physical evidence that might connect him to the crime, including injuries consistent with a violent struggle or traces of blood on his clothing. None were found. His account remained consistent. He cooperated fully with investigators, and there was no evidence linking him to the murder. He was therefore eliminated as a suspect relatively quickly, allowing detectives to concentrate their efforts elsewhere. As weeks passed without an arrest, investigators increasingly turned toward broader theories that might explain the otherwise inexplicable crime. The first and ultimately most widely accepted possibility was that Simonetta had become the victim of a random killer. According to this theory, she entered the women's restroom at precisely the wrong moment and encountered someone she had never met before. The apparent absence of any personal connection between victim and attacker supported this possibility. Furthermore, the extraordinary violence of the assault, combined with the lack of robbery or confirmed sexual assault, led some investigators and later commentators to suggest that the killer may have been suffering from a severe psychological disturbance. Nevertheless, the random killer theory remained exactly that, a theory. No evidence ever established the identity of such an individual or proved that the encounter had been entirely accidental. A second line of inquiry focused on reports that an unknown man had allegedly harassed or followed female students within the university on previous occasions. Detectives considered whether this unidentified individual might somehow have been connected to Simonetta's murder. If a person had been regularly frequenting the campus for the purpose of harassing women, it seemed reasonable to ask whether that behavior had eventually escalated into lethal violence. Police investigated this possibility, interviewing witnesses and examining available information regarding earlier incidents. Yet despite these efforts, No evidence conclusively linked any reported harassment to Simonetta's death. The reports remained troubling, but ultimately insufficient to identify a suspect. Years later, as other violent crimes against women were examined by independent researchers and writers, another hypothesis emerged. Some observers speculated that Simonetta's murder might have formed part of a broader pattern, involving an unidentified serial offender operating in or around Milan during the early 1970s. Similarities in the use of extreme violence encourage comparisons with other unsolved cases. However, investigators were never able to establish a forensic connection between Simonetta's murder and any other homicide. Without matching physical evidence, eyewitness testimony, or reliable admissions from suspect, the serial killer hypothesis remained speculative. It generated discussion, but produced no breakthrough. A fourth theory centered not on the victim, but on the location itself. Some investigators believe the killer may have possessed detailed knowledge of the university. The timing of the attack appeared unusually advantageous. The campus was largely deserted because of the summer holidays. Construction work generated overwhelming noise that could conceal cries for help. Escape routes through the extensive university complex may have been familiar to someone who regularly spent time there. Supporters of this theory argued that such circumstances favored an individual who understood the building's layout and routines. Yet once again, the available evidence never identified a specific person fitting that description. The theory explained how the crime might have been committed without detection, but it did not reveal who committed it. As months gradually became years, investigators were forced to confront the painful reality that the case had reached an impasse. Several factors combined to prevent meaningful progress. The nearly 48-hour delay before the body was discovered had allowed time to alter the crime scene. The continuously running water may have affected valuable traces that otherwise could have assisted. Forensic examination. Scientific techniques available in 1971 could not analyze the biological material recovered beneath Simonetta's fingernails. No eyewitnesses had observed the attack or the killer's departure. The construction work that investigators believed may have concealed Simonetta's cries also ensured that no one recognized the violence while it was taking place. Each obstacle alone would have complicated an investigation. Together, they created conditions from which the inquiry never fully recovered. Detectives pursued every reasonable lead available to them, interviewed hundreds of individuals, evaluated physical evidence with the technology of the time, and examined multiple investigative theories. Yet every path eventually reached the same destination: uncertainty. The identity of the person who entered the women's restroom near staircase G and carried out the attack remained unknown. Without sufficient evidence to identify a suspect beyond reasonable doubt, the investigation gradually slowed. The police files remained open, but the momentum that accompanies every new homicide inquiry inevitably diminished. Simonetta Ferrero's murder did not become unsolved because investigators ignored it or abandoned it without effort. Rather, it became unsolved because every available piece of evidence, though carefully examined, stopped just short of revealing the one fact that mattered most. The investigation had reconstructed the victim's final day, documented the brutality of the attack, established what had not been taken, determined what had not occurred, and explored every major theory supported by the known facts. What could never determine was the identity of the person responsible. That unanswered question would ultimately ensure that the murder of Simonetta Ferrero entered Italian history not as a solved crime, but as one of the nation's most enduring and haunting cold cases. Unlike many homicide investigations that eventually move from the crime scene to the courtroom, the case of Simonetta Ferrero never reached the stage where prosecutors could present evidence before a judge. There would be no formal indictment, no defendant seated in the dock. No witnesses called to testify about the identity of the killer, and no jury or judicial panel, under the Italian legal system, asked to determine guilt or innocence. Instead, the legal history of the case became defined not by a trial, but by the absence of one. That absence, more than anything else, illustrates the extraordinary difficulty investigators faced from the earliest days of the inquiry. Criminal justice systems rely upon evidence that can withstand legal scrutiny. Investigators may develop theories, identify persons of interest, or recognize suspicious circumstances. But suspicion alone is never sufficient to support a prosecution. Before charges can be brought in a homicide case, prosecutors must possess evidence capable of demonstrating that a particular individual committed the crime. In Simonetta Ferrero's case, despite the extensive investigation that followed her murder, that evidentiary threshold was never reached. From the beginning, detectives pursued every available avenue. They examined the crime scene, documented the physical evidence, questioned hundreds of individuals connected with the university, reconstructed Simonetta's final known movements, and evaluated each theory that emerged from the available facts. Yet every promising lead eventually encountered the same obstacle. No witness could identify the attacker. No confession was obtained. No forensic evidence available in 1971 conclusively connected any specific individual to the murder. Even the biological material recovered beneath Simonetta's fingernails, which today might have become a decisive piece of evidence through DNA analysis, remained scientifically unusable at the time. Without the ability to identify the person from whom those skin cells originated, investigators possessed evidence that demonstrated resistance but not identity. The bloody handprint recovered from the restroom door presented similar limitations. Although it suggested certain physical characteristics about the attacker and contributed to an estimated height of approximately 1.80 to 1.85 meters, it did not establish a name. A physical description alone cannot sustain a criminal prosecution. Countless individuals could potentially match such general characteristics, and the law requires proof that extends far beyond probability or resemblance. Consequently, the handprint remained an investigative clue rather than admissible proof against any particular suspect. The interviews conducted throughout the investigation likewise failed to produce testimony capable of moving the case toward prosecution. More than 300 people were questioned, including construction workers, university guards, administrative staff, students, faculty members, and others known to have been present on campus during the relevant period. Detectives carefully compared statements, searching for inconsistencies or observations that might identify a suspect. Yet no testimony placed a specific individual inside the women's restroom with Simonetta at the estimated time of the attack. No one reported seeing a blood-stained individual hurriedly leaving the building. No witness described suspicious behavior sufficiently detailed to support criminal charges. The investigation produced many questions, but very few definitive answers. Even individuals who temporarily attracted investigative attention were ultimately eliminated when evidence failed to support continuing suspicion. Mario Tozzo, whose discovery of Simonetta's body initiated the police response, underwent the same careful scrutiny that investigators apply in serious homicide cases. His movements were examined, his account was evaluated, and investigators searched for injuries or physical traces that might indicate involvement in the crime. None were found. His cooperation with authorities remained consistent, and the evidence supported his elimination from the inquiry rather than his inclusion within it. His experience reflected the broader pattern of the investigation. Every avenue was explored, but none ultimately identified the killer. As the months passed, prosecutors found themselves in an increasingly difficult position. They possessed overwhelming evidence that a murder had occurred. The autopsy clearly established homicide. The crime scene documented the violence beyond any reasonable doubt. Yet proving that a murder occurred is only the first step within the legal process. Equally essential is proving who committed it. Without that second element, criminal proceedings cannot advance. The distinction between investigative suspicion and prosecutable evidence became critically important. Detectives may reasonably consider multiple theories while gathering information, but courts require reliable proof linking an identifiable defendant to the offense. In Simonetta's case, none of the principal investigative theories evolved into evidence capable of satisfying that legal standard. The hypothesis that the murder had been committed by a random attacker remained plausible but unproven. Reports concerning an unidentified man who allegedly harassed female students inside the university generated understandable concern. Yet no evidence connected those reports directly to Simonetta's death. Speculation regarding a possible serial offender likewise failed to establish any confirmed forensic relationship between this homicide and other crimes. Finally, the suggestion that the killer possessed detailed familiarity with the university explained certain circumstances surrounding the attack, but did not identify any specific individual responsible. Each theory offered investigators a possible framework through which to understand the crime. None supplied the concrete evidence necessary to begin criminal proceedings. Consequently, the legal process effectively reached a standstill before it could truly begin. There was no arrest warrant issued for a confirmed suspect because investigators never identified one. There was no indictment because prosecutors lacked evidence against any particular individual. There were no preliminary hearings, no presentation of forensic testimony before court, and no judicial examination of competing legal arguments. The courtroom, the place where criminal responsibility is ordinarily determined, remained absent from Simonetta Ferrero's story. Instead, the case continued to exist almost entirely within police archives and investigative files, periodically reviewed but never transformed into an active prosecution. This outcome illustrates one of the most difficult realities within criminal justice. Not every homicide reaches trial. Public attention often focuses on dramatic courtroom proceedings, cross-examinations, and verdicts, creating the impression that every serious crime eventually culminates in a judicial resolution. In reality, that outcome depends entirely upon the availability of sufficient evidence. Where evidence cannot identify a suspect, prosecutors cannot ethically or legally proceed simply because a crime demands resolution. The burden of proof exists to protect both society and individual rights, requiring that accusations rest upon demonstrable facts rather than speculation. Although this principle sometimes means that victims' families are denied the closure they desperately seek, it also preserves the integrity of the justice system itself. In Simonetta's case, investigators could not responsibly ask prosecutors to charge an unknown individual, nor could prosecutors present theories unsupported by legally admissible evidence. The absence of a trial therefore reflected not indifference, but the limitations imposed by the evidence available. As years turned into decades, Simonetta Ferrero's murder gradually entered the category commonly described as a cold case. This designation did not signify that the investigation had been officially abandoned or forgotten. Rather, it indicated that all immediately available investigative leads had been exhausted without identifying the perpetrator. Cold cases remain open in the sense that new evidence, new forensic techniques, or credible new information can potentially revive investigative activity. Nevertheless, without such developments, they often remain unresolved for many years. Advances in forensic science transformed criminal investigations across the world during the decades. Following Simonetta's death, DNA profiling, unavailable in 1971, eventually solved numerous murders once thought impossible to resolve. Cases that had remained dormant for decades were reopened when preserved biological evidence could finally be analyzed with modern technology. Understandably, Simonetta Ferrero's case has frequently been discussed within that broader context. Observers have often reflected upon how differently the investigation might have unfolded had contemporary forensic methods existed at the time of the murder, or had the crime scene been discovered immediately rather than nearly 48 hours later. Such reflections, however, remain matters of hindsight rather than evidence. They cannot alter the historical reality that investigators in 1971 worked within the scientific capabilities available to them. More than 50 years after Simonetta entered the women's restroom near Staircase G, no individual has ever been formally accused before a court of law for a murder. No judicial verdict has established criminal responsibility. No sentence has been imposed. Officially and legally, the identity of the person who ended her life remains unknown. The case, therefore, occupies a unique place within Italian criminal history, not because of a dramatic trial or controversial acquittal, but because the legal process never reached the point where such proceedings could even begin. The investigation demonstrated extraordinary effort. The forensic examination documented the violence in painstaking detail, and prosecutors possessed undeniable proof that a brutal homicide had occurred. Yet the single element upon which every criminal trial depends, the identification of the offender, beyond a legally sustainable standard, was never achieved. As a result, Simonetta Ferrero's case remains one of Italy's most enduring unsolved murders, suspended indefinitely between certainty about what happened and uncertainty about who was responsible. More than half a century has passed since Simonetta Ferrero walked into the Università Cattolica del Sacro Cuore on a quiet Saturday in July 1971. Yet the questions surrounding her death remain as compelling today as they were when investigators first sealed off the women's restroom near Staircase G. Time has transformed countless criminal investigations into historical footnotes, their details fading from public memory as new tragedies replace old headlines. Simonetta's case followed a different path. Instead of disappearing into obscurity, it gradually became one of Italy's most recognizable unsolved murders. Remembered not because investigators ever identified the killer, but because they never could. The passage of decades has not diminished the mystery. If anything, the absence of answers has made the case even more enduring. Every generation that encounters the story arrives at the same unsettling conclusion reached by detectives in 1971. A young woman entered a respected university in broad daylight, was brutally murdered, and the person responsible disappeared without ever being brought before a court of law. That extraordinary combination of public location, extreme violence, and complete anonymity has ensured that the murder remains firmly embedded in discussions of Italy's most significant cold cases. The case eventually became widely known as Delitto della Cattolica, the murder of the Catholic University. The name itself reflects how inseparable the crime became from its location. The Università Cattolica del Sacro Cuore was already one of Italy's most respected academic institutions, associated with scholarship, discipline, and intellectual achievement. For many people, the idea that such a brutal homicide could occur within its walls challenged deeply held assumptions about where violence belonged. Universities are places where young people pursue education, build friendships, and prepare for their futures. They are not places commonly associated with unsolved murders committed in the middle of the day. The contrast between the institution's reputation and the nature of the crime made the case unforgettable. In the years that followed, journalists, historians, criminologists, and documentary producers repeatedly returned to Simonetta's story. Newspaper articles revisited the investigation, examining whether overlooked clues might still exist. Television programs devoted to unsolved crimes included the case among Italy's most enduring mysteries. Books discussing famous cold cases often reserved a chapter for the murder at the Catholic University, emphasizing both the brutality of the attack and the extraordinary lack of conclusive evidence. These renewed examinations rarely produced genuinely new information, but they demonstrated something equally significant. Public interest never completely disappeared. The case continued to invite careful study because it represented more than an isolated act of violence. It illustrated the profound difficulties investigators face when physical evidence is limited. Witnesses are absent, and scientific technology has not yet reached the level required to unlock the answers hidden within a crime scene. As forensic science advanced throughout the late 20th and early 21st centuries, many observers naturally wondered whether Simonetta Ferrero's murder might one day be solved through techniques unavailable in 1971. Across the world, biological evidence preserved for decades has allowed investigators to identify offenders long after crimes were committed. Families who had lived for years without answers suddenly found long-awaited resolution through DNA analysis and other scientific developments. Simonetta's case has often been discussed within that broader movement. The skin cells recovered beneath her fingernails, which could not be analyzed at the time of the investigation, became symbolic of the frustrating gap between the evidence investigators possessed and the technology available to interpret it. Yet despite these scientific advances, the murder officially remains unsolved. The hope inspired by modern forensic methods has never altered the historical reality that no individual has been identified as the person responsible for Simonetta's death. Among the many aspects that continue to fascinate investigators and researchers, perhaps none is more disturbing than the complete absence of an obvious motive. In numerous homicide cases, investigators can eventually identify financial disputes, personal conflicts, domestic violence, organized criminal activity, or sexual motives that explain why a victim was targeted. Simonetta's case resists such straightforward explanation. Her money remained untouched. Her jewelry remained untouched. There was no confirmed evidence of sexual assault. Investigators uncovered no known enemies, no documented threats, and no significant personal conflicts capable of explaining such extraordinary violence. This absence of motive does not merely complicate the investigation. It fundamentally shapes how the crime is remembered. The murder appears to stand outside the ordinary patterns through which violent crime is often understood. Without a clear motive, every theory remains incomplete. The unanswered question of why has become inseparable from the unanswered question of who. Another element that has given the case lasting emotional power is the ordinary nature of Simonetta's final day. There was nothing extraordinary about her plans. She shopped for books. She visited a cosmetic store. She attended a beauty appointment. She prepared for an upcoming family vacation to Corsica. These were familiar activities, repeated by countless people every day. They reflected optimism rather than danger, routine rather than crisis. Nothing in the documented timeline suggests that Simonetta believed she was facing any unusual risk. Her return to the university, although never fully explained, also appeared entirely unremarkable at the time. Whether she intended to borrow books, collect course information, photocopy documents, or simply use the restroom, none of those possibilities implied that she was entering an environment she had reason to fear. That ordinary sequence of events makes the crime particularly unsettling. It reminds us that profound tragedy sometimes emerges not from dramatic decisions or reckless choices, but from moments that appear completely routine until viewed in hindsight. The investigation also left behind one powerful symbolic image that continues to define the case. The sound of construction work echoing through an almost empty university. Investigators believe that the pneumatic drills operating elsewhere in the building may have concealed the sounds of Simonetta's struggle. Whether she cried out for help can never be known with certainty. What investigators could conclude was that the constant mechanical noise created conditions in which signs of danger may have gone completely unnoticed. This detail has remained one of the most haunting aspects of the case because it illustrates how ordinary circumstances can unintentionally contribute to extraordinary consequences. The construction workers were performing routine maintenance. The noise itself was expected. Yet that same ordinary noise may have prevented intervention during the crucial moments when Simonetta fought for her life. Equally haunting is another simple image. The sound of running water that finally drew attention to the restroom nearly 2 days later. Mario Tozo did not discover the crime because someone reported a missing woman inside the university. He discovered it because he noticed an unattended faucet continuing to run inside an otherwise quiet building. The flowing water became the first indication that something was wrong. It led to the discovery of Simonetta's body, but it also represented another painful irony. The same water that attracted attention after nearly 48 hours may also have altered valuable evidence during the delay before investigators reached the scene. Throughout the years, countless attempts have been made to interpret the available evidence differently, to reconsider old theories, or to imagine explanations consistent with the known facts. Yet responsible examination of the case requires recognizing the limits imposed by the evidence itself. There is an understandable temptation in famous unsolved crimes to fill gaps with speculation or dramatic narratives. Simonetta Ferrero's story resists that approach. The historical record provides certain facts and leaves many questions unanswered. Respect for both the victim and the investigative process requires acknowledging that distinction. The killer's identity remains unknown not because investigators lacked imagination, but because the available evidence never identified one individual beyond reasonable doubt. The uncertainty is genuine, and it remains part of the historical truth of the case. Perhaps the most important legacy of Simonetta Ferrero's story lies not in the mystery itself, but in the person whose life preceded it. Over time, unsolved cases sometimes become defined entirely by the search for the unknown offender. The victim's identity risks becoming secondary to the puzzle investigators were unable to solve. Simonetta deserves to be remembered differently. Before she became the subject of newspaper headlines, she was a 26-year-old university graduate who had built a professional career as a recruitment specialist at Montedison. She was described by those who knew her as intelligent, serious, and responsible. She came from a comfortable family and was preparing to leave on a summer holiday with them. Her life was not defined by violence. Violence interrupted it. Remembering that distinction restores humanity to a story too often summarized only as an unsolved murder. More than 50 years later, the central questions remain unchanged. Why did Simonetta enter the university that afternoon? Did she encounter her attacker by chance, or had someone anticipated her arrival? Was the killer familiar with the building, or merely fortunate enough to exploit the circumstances of an unusually quiet campus? What might investigators have discovered had the body been found immediately rather than nearly 2 days later? Could modern forensic science have changed the outcome if available in 1971? Some of these questions may never receive definitive answers. Others may continue to inspire careful investigation by future researchers. But until credible new evidence emerges, there remain questions rather than conclusions. In the end, The murder of Simonetta Ferrero stands as one of Italy's most haunting reminders that justice is not always measured by the dedication of investigators or the determination of prosecutors. Sometimes justice depends upon evidence that simply does not exist. Witnesses who never saw what happened, or scientific methods that arrived decades too late. The investigation into Simonetta's death demonstrated persistence, professionalism, and an exhaustive effort to follow every available lead. Yet effort alone cannot create proof where proof is absent, and so the file remains open in history. If not in court, a record of a crime that is known in almost every detail except the one that matters most. On a quiet summer afternoon in July 1971, Simonetta Ferrero entered a university she already knew well. She never returned home. Her family never received the answers they deserved. The investigation uncovered the circumstances of her final struggle, documented the courage with which she resisted, and preserved the evidence that time allowed. What could not preserve was the identity of the person who took her life. More than half a century later, the silence that followed those moments inside the women's restroom near staircase G continues to echo through Italian criminal history. The construction noise faded long ago. The running water was eventually turned off. And generations of students have since walked the same university corridors unaware of the tragedy that once unfolded there. But Simonetta Ferrero's name endures, not merely as the victim of an unsolved crime, but as a reminder that every unresolved case represents a life interrupted, a family forever changed, and a truth that still waits, patiently and silently, to be discovered. What remains most striking about the case of Simonetta Ferrero is not only what was lost, but what was never recovered, certainty. In many criminal investigations, time eventually sharpens the outline of truth, even if it does not always deliver justice. Witnesses age, memories fade, and evidence degrades, but somewhere within that erosion, a narrative usually solidifies. In this case, the opposite occurred. Time did not clarify the story, it widened its gaps. Each decade added new interpretive layers without changing the underlying facts. The physical evidence remained exactly as it had been documented in 1971. A violent struggle inside a university restroom, a victim who resisted fiercely. No confirmed sexual assault, no theft, and no identified perpetrator. Everything else, motive, identity, intention, remain suspended in uncertainty. This is what makes the case persist in public memory. It is not only the brutality of the crime, but the structural silence surrounding it. There is no confession to analyze, no courtroom testimony to reinterpret, no final verdict to debate. Instead, there's only the investigative record itself, frozen in time, still speaking in incomplete sentences. Over the years, cold case discussions often return to a single point: how differently this investigation might have unfolded under modern conditions. DNA profiling, digital tracking, surveillance systems, and rapid emergency response protocols have transformed how violent crimes are solved today. In Simonetta Ferrero's case, none of those tools existed in 1971 Milan in a usable form. Even the most careful investigators were constrained by the limits of their era. The evidence they collected was preserved with professionalism, but the science required to fully interpret it would not arrive for decades. It would be misleading to suggest that technology alone explains the outcome. Even in modern investigations, crimes can remain unsolved when key elements are missing: witnesses, suspects, or a clear relational link between victim and offender. Simonetta's case is often studied precisely because it contains all three absences at once. No one saw the attack, no one definitively identified a suspect, and no known connection has ever been established between her and any individual capable of explaining the violence she endured. In that sense, the the case is not only a reflection of forensic limitations, but also a reminder of how fragile criminal reconstruction can be when a single moment occurs outside observation. Perhaps the most enduring lesson lies in the randomness that investigators themselves could never eliminate from their analysis. Whether the attack was opportunistic or premeditated remains unknown. But what is certain is that Simonetta Ferrero did not leave her home that morning expecting danger. She followed a sequence of ordinary actions: shopping, appointments, travel preparation, before entering a place she had known in her past academic life. Nothing in that trajectory suggests foreknowledge of what would occur inside the university that afternoon. This collision between the ordinary and the irreversible is what continues to give the case its weight. It is not defined by spectacle, but by interruption, the sudden point at which a normal life was violently removed from its expected course. In reflecting on Simonetta Ferrero's story, investigators, journalists, and readers alike are ultimately confronted with an uncomfortable truth. Not every crime yields resolution. Some remain structurally incomplete, not because they were poorly investigated, but because the conditions necessary for certainty were never present to begin with. The file on her murder remains formally open in history, even if inactive in practice. It exists as a record of everything that was known and everything that was not. It is a reminder that justice systems are built to respond to evidence, not absence. And when absence dominates, even the most serious crimes can remain beyond legal reach. Simonetta Ferrero's name endures in Italian criminal history, not because her case was solved, but because it was not. And in that unresolved space, her story continues to serve as a quiet but persistent question about memory, evidence, and the limits of knowing. The university corridors where it happened have long since returned to their ordinary function. New students pass through spaces that once held a tragedy they will likely never learn about. Life continues in layers that rarely intersect with the past. But for those who encounter the case, even briefly, one detail tends to remain: the image of a young woman entering a familiar building on a summer afternoon, and the silence that followed her disappearance. It is in that silence, not in the speculation, not in the theories, and not in the missing answers, that the case of Simonetta Ferrero ultimately remains. What remains, decades after the events of July 1971, is not a resolution, but a persistent structural silence that has gradually become part of the identity of the case itself, shaping how it is discussed, remembered, and analyzed within the broader history of Italian criminal investigations. The murder of Simonetta Ferrero continues to exist in an unusual state between documented fact and unresolved absence, where every essential element of the crime has been established except the identity of the person who committed it. Investigators were able to determine where the attack occurred, when it likely took place, the nature of the violence, the victim's movements in her final hours, and the physical struggle that unfolded inside the university restroom near staircase G. Yet none of these reconstructed details ever coalesced into a legally actionable identification of a suspect. Over time, this gap between knowledge and proof became the defining characteristic of the case, shaping not only how it is studied by criminologists, but also how it is understood in public memory. In many criminal investigations, the passage of years tends to compress uncertainty as new evidence emerges or witness accounts are reevaluated under different conditions. But in this instance, the opposite occurred. Time preserved the mystery in its original form, locking the case into a fixed configuration where no new testimony, no later confession, and no technological advancement has yet been able to alter the foundational unknown. This is partly due to the specific conditions of the crime scene itself, which, while meticulously documented by investigators of the era, was already compromised by the time it was discovered nearly 48 hours after the attack, and further complicated by environmental factors such as the continuous flow of water and the absence of immediate containment of the area. It is also due to the limitations of forensic science at the time, which, despite careful collection of biological material and trace evidence, could not transform those findings into identifiable genetic profiles or digital reconstructions that modern investigations might rely upon today. Yet, even acknowledging these constraints does not fully account for why the case remains unresolved, because many historical investigations with similar limitations have nonetheless been solved through indirect evidence, witness re-examination, or confessional breakthroughs, none of which ever materialized in this instance. The investigative record instead reflects a pattern of exhaustive inquiry that repeatedly reached the same boundary, a point at which plausible theories existed in abundance, but verifiable connections to a specific perpetrator did not. Whether considering the hypothesis of a random encounter, the possibility of a known individual within the university environment, or the suggestion of a broader pattern of violence linked to other unresolved cases of the era, each interpretive framework ultimately collapses under the same evidentiary limitation: the absence of a single confirmed link between suspect and act. This absence has had a profound effect on how the case is situated within criminological discourse, because it forces analysts to confront a situation in which traditional investigative categories, such as motive, opportunity, and suspect profiling, remain incomplete or entirely speculative. The victim herself, by all available accounts, does not appear to have been involved in any circumstances that would typically generate foreseeable risk, which further complicates retrospective attempts to construct a coherent narrative of causation. Instead, what remains is a sequence of ordinary actions leading into an extraordinary and irreversible event, a transition that defies the expectation that violent crime can always be traced back through identifiable patterns of escalation or conflict. Over the decades, this structural incompleteness has ensured that the case continues to be revisited not because of new breakthroughs, but because it represents a persistent analytical challenge: how to interpret a fully documented homicide that lacks the single evidentiary element required to close it within the framework of criminal law. In this sense, Simonetta Ferrero's murder has become less a static historical file and more a reference point in discussions about the limits of forensic reconstruction, illustrating how even carefully preserved evidence cannot guarantee resolution when critical contextual information is missing from the outset. The university itself, once the physical center of the investigation, has long since returned to its ordinary academic function, its corridors filled again with students who are largely unaware of the event that occurred there more than half a century ago. Yet the absence embedded in the case continues to linger in archival records, journalistic accounts, and academic references that periodically return to it as an example of unresolved complexity. What distinguishes this case from many others is not only the brutality of the act or the setting in which it occurred, but the enduring inability of successive generations of investigators and researchers to move beyond the boundaries established in the first days of inquiry. Each return to the evidence produces the same result: a reaffirmation of what is known and a confrontation with what remains unknowable. In that sense, the case resists narrative closure not because it lacks information, but because the available information never converges into certainty. As a result, Simonetta Ferrero's name persists in the historical record, not attached to a conclusion, but to an ongoing condition of unresolved inquiry, serving as a reminder that within criminal investigation, there are cases defined not by their endings, but by their refusal to end, and that some questions, even when pursued with diligence, patience, and evolving methods across generations, remain fundamentally open not due to oversight, but due to the irreversible absence of the decisive fact that would transform investigation into resolution.